Okay, so today we're going to make spinach and green herb gnocchi. So this is quite a tasty treat. It's a little bit involved, the process, so you can have a little bit of time set aside for it, but it's quite rewarding at the end. So I've got here on the stove a pot of potatoes. They're on high heat coming up the boil. I've also put one pot of water, large pot, that we're going to cook the gnocchi in. So always good to have that. It's starting to warm up slowly, so when you're finally ready, it's all ready to go. I'm going to turn another pan onto the heat here. I'm going to start by making the spinach and green herb mixture that's going to get folded through into the potato mixture. So I've got just an array of herbs here. I've got some sage. I'm just going to pick these and pop them straight into a blender. Bay leaf, I don't want that one in this dish. So you can use pretty much any green herb along the lines of Italian flavours that you've got. A bit of oregano. Basil does go quite nicely, but the thing with basil is when you cook it, it'll have the tendency to go brown. So generally stay away from using basil or use it to finish off the dish towards the end. One herb that does go nicely, what I don't have, is marjoram. That's fantastic for making gnocchi. A little rosemary. Okay. Meanwhile, I'll just add a little bit of oil into our pan. Small pinch of asafoetida. The spinach can go in here. Just gently wilt the spinach down. Just adding more as you go as the space becomes available. Give that a little seasoning. I can turn off the heat. The rest of the heat from the pan will finish that off. Okay, back to our herbs. I've also got some parsley here. I'm going to use some extra virgin olive oil. I'll just blend a small amount just to get the ball rolling. So you need quite a bit of olive oil here. And we'll add some parsley in. Maybe just a little more olive oil. Okay, so we've got a good herb puree there. And I'm going to finish the process in the food processor with the spinach now. Okay, so we'll continue by placing the spinach into the food processor. You can do everything in the food processor to start with. I just find the herbs tend to be a little finer if done in the blender, but you can always chop them by hand and then throw them into here also. So we'll start off just the spinach. I'll add some more of that parsley in as we're going. Finally, we can mix that herb puree in. I'm just going to leave a tiny bit aside to put in our sauce. We'll just scrape the edges to make sure we've got all that spinach pureed nicely. Okay. Things running away from me today. So we'll just remove the blender. Next we'll just start our sauce while those potatoes are still coming up. Just going to do a simple tomato and eggplant number. So start off with the eggplant. Just remove the top and tail. We'll just cut this into strips. We're also going to use some broccoli in here, but the broccoli will go right at the end. And the broccoli's basically just add a bit of texture, a bit of crunch to it, because gnocchi is quite a sort of dense sort of dish with not much crunchy bite in there. It's an interesting thing, gnocchi. To be honest, I'd have to say it's not one of my favourite things, but I think every girlfriend I've had in my life loves gnocchi, so it's a good thing to learn how to make, I guess. So we'll go for a pinch of acedia with some grapeseed oil. Eggplants can go in. So we're going to cook these quite slowly and gradually. And our tomatoes. So just remove the core of these ones. The potatoes are up to the boil, so I'm just going to turn those slightly down so they're just simmering. And tomatoes can be roughly chopped. They're going to break down and form saucy consistency. And by putting the tomatoes in early with the eggplant, it just helps them to cook properly. Often if you're using eggplant in a pan where there's not much liquid, it's going to soak up a lot of oil. So by giving it the liquid of the tomatoes, it helps to cook it nice and evenly without soaking up all that oil. Okay. So just going to let these slowly cook down together. Just check on our potatoes. When you're making gnocchi, potatoes, you definitely don't want them to be overcooked. You want the mixture to be as dry as possible, and that way you have to add minimal amount of flour or semolina to it. So they're almost there, just a little bit longer. So in the meantime we can chop up our broccoli. I think around 2/3 of this will be enough. It's always a good idea to have everything completely prepared, so when we actually start making the gnocchi we can clear all the bench space, because it does make a little bit of a mess. About 1 more minute on the potatoes. Some seasoning into this one. I'm just going to reduce the heat on this now to a low. The potatoes feel pretty good there, so we'll turn that one right off the heat. Just remove as much of the moisture as possible, give them a good shake. And back into the pot. Just mash the potatoes next. If you have a muesli, muesli's really good to use, so you get that perfect consistency. A masher will do the job just as well. As you can see, I've left the pieces of potato relatively big, which makes it difficult to mash, but you get more of the desired consistency that you're looking for with the gnocchi. If they're too small, then often you'll find the mixture become very moist. There's many different styles of this that you can do, and many different flavours you can add. You can add even pumpkin in with the potato, gives quite a nice colour and taste to it. Sweet potato will work well. You do want it as lump free as possible though, particularly if you're going to use a piping bag to squeeze them into the water. Okay, we're looking pretty good there. Take our spinach and herb mixture. Pop that in with our potato. Along with some seasoning. Bearing in mind that we've still got a little flour and semolina to add. Just mix that through. So in this one we're obviously angling for that nice green colour. Always give a little taste at this point before we add any flour or semolina to check the flavour basically. That's good. So I generally add the minimal amount of flour possible. So just a sprinkle, bit of semolina. Basically we want to get it to a consistency where it's just workable with the hands in a dough-like form, where it's not sticking, but we don't want it too dry. We want to get away with using the minimal amount possible of the flour. If your potato mixture was quite wet, you'll just need to add more. And you just gauge it on how it feels basically, if you're going to be able to work with it or not. Just take a tiny bit more. So you should just be able to pick it up and form a shape, and you don't want it to feel too soft or too sticky. Give that a touch more of the semolina. Okay, I'll just pop that out onto our bench now. So there's many different ways you can shape basically, and you can even do it from a piping bag and cut with a knife straight into the boiling water, but I'm just going to do it by hand today. It's quite a fun thing to do, working with. It's like playing with Play-Doh when you're a kid. I'll just make a few balls. I always get a couple of plates ready with some semolina on. So basically, you're not wanting anything to stick here. So you just use as much semolina as you need to avoid any sticking. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to roll it out into balls and then just cut off pieces basically, which will be our little gnocchis. You can do different shapes. You can make them individually if you've really got a lot of time up your sleeve. You can make patterns with a fork, whatever you like really. Let's take a slightly finer knife. Always just keep a little pile there just to put the knife in, and then just cut off small pieces. I always tend to keep the shape fairly rustic. I'm always a fan of that rustic style Italian cooking when doing that sort of thing. So the only thing you want to watch out for is that you don't have too much chunky stuff in that puree of herbs and spinach. Otherwise, if you've got bits sticking out, it makes it a little bit difficult to cut. Let's just keep them a little separate on the plate because they do have the tendency to stick together. Okay, so due to the magic of television, as you can see, we have the final product of the gnocchi. There's quite a bit there, so we decided not to make you watch me do all of it. So our sauce is coming along nicely there. I've just turned it up slightly just to finish that eggplant off. It's still a little bit not quite cooked for 100%, so that'll be done in no time. Our water is up to the boil, so I'm going to start putting our gnocchis in. So just need to be careful here, one by one. Drop them in, bit of salt in the water. You don't want the water to be boiling rapidly. It can be at the very start, but once they're in, it should just be simmering. Basically how it goes is they're just going to float up to the top when they're ready. We'll scoop them off and pop them into our other pan. Like I was saying before, it is quite easy just to use a piping bag and pipe them straight into the water, cutting them off with a knife as you go. But I thought I'd show you this way just in case some of you all don't have piping bags. This is a pretty foolproof way. Just give those a light stir. I'm just going to turn that down so as it's just simmering. I'll probably do these in 2 lots as it's going to be too much for the one pot. Meantime, we can add our broccoli in now to the sauce. We'll let that finish off in there. Occasionally just give a gentle stir just to make sure nothing's sticking on the bottom. But they are a little fragile, so don't be too rough with them. And you can actually leave them in this form here, made up, ready to go on a plate. As long as there's enough semolina to coat them, we can cover these with a Glad wrap. Not actually keep in the fridge for a couple of days, and you can cook them when you're ready. So as you can see, we're starting to get them popping up to the top now. You'll tell the texture will be slightly different now as well. So generally give them about 30 seconds to a minute once they've come to the top. And then just slowly start removing them into our other pan, which I'll turn on to a lower heat now. We can just start spooning these into our pan. Looks like it, so let's give these a very gentle mix through. And we're okay to go. A little chopped parsley on top. There you have fresh homemade gnocchi, spinach, fresh garden herbs and that nice tomato eggplant sauce. Enjoy.